It was also the only thing in the world that belonged entirely to 6-year-old Jamie Monroe, and he was holding it out to a stranger, like an offering to a god. Here, Jamie said, his small voice cutting through the chaos of the free clinic's waiting room. This is for you. Dominic Russo stared down at the child standing before him. He'd come to collect his mother. Elena insisted on volunteering at this crumbling clinic in the worst part of Brooklyn, no matter how many times he'd begged her to stop, and instead found himself frozen in place by a boy with two thin wrists and eyes that held too much knowing for someone so young. I don't need a toy car, Dominic said carefully. Yes, you do. Jamie pushed the car toward him with stubborn insistence. You look like my mom does when she cries at night. She thinks I don't hear, but I do. She's sad because my heart is broken and we can't fix it. He pressed the car into Dominic's palm, his small fingers cold against Dominic's skin. Maybe this will help you feel less sad too. The waiting room had gone quiet. Dominic was aware, distantly, of the eyes on him. Patients clutching numbered tickets, exhausted nurses moving between stations, his own men positioned by the door with hands hovering near concealed weapons. He was aware of his mother rising from her volunteer desk, her face pale, her hand pressed to her mouth. But all he could see was the boy. Brown hair that fell across his forehead, blue eyes ringed with shadows too dark for a child, a frame so fragile it looked like it might shatter in a strong wind, and that phrase, echoing in his skull like a gunshot. My heart is broken, and we can't fix it. Jamie! A woman burst through the staff door, still wearing scrubs, her dark hair escaping from a messy ponytail. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from fighting battles she couldn't win. She crossed the room in 3 strides and scooped the boy into her arms, her eyes flicking to Dominic with a mixture of fear and defiance. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice tight. He knows he's supposed to stay in the break room. He didn't mean any harm. He didn't cause any harm. Dominic's voice came out rougher than he intended. He looked at the toy car in his hand, this battered little thing that a sick child had offered him because he looked sad. He was being kind. The woman's expression flickered. Surprise, quickly masked. She shifted Jamie on her hip, and Dominic noticed the way she held him, careful and close, like she was afraid he might break. Like she was afraid he might disappear. Jamie, baby, you can't give away your car. Her voice softened when she spoke to her son. It's your favorite. But he needed it more. Jamie's logic was unassailable in the way only a child's could be. You always say we should help people who are hurting. He's hurting, Mom, I can tell. Dominic felt something crack in his chest. 3 years. 3 years since he'd buried his son in the family plot, since he'd stood over a grave too small for the grief it contained and sworn he would never let himself feel anything again. 3 years of ice and anger and the cold comfort of control. And now this boy, this stranger's child with his broken heart and his battered toy car, was looking at him like he could see straight through to the wound that had never healed. Keep it. Dominic pressed the car back into Jamie's hands, his movements gentle in a way he'd forgotten he was capable of. A gift like that is too important to give away, but thank you for offering. Jamie studied him for a long moment, those 2 old eyes searching his face. Then he nodded solemnly. Okay, but you can come visit him whenever you want. He lives in my pocket. A sound escaped Dominic, something between a laugh and a sob, quickly swallowed. He straightened, forcing his face back into its familiar mask, and turned to find his mother standing behind him. Elena Russo was crying. Silent tears tracked down her weathered cheeks, and she was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen in 3 years. Hope. Desperate, fragile hope. Dominic, she said softly. This is Ivy Monroe. She's one of our nurses. And this is her son, Jamie. We've met. Dominic's voice was steady now, controlled. He glanced at Ivy, noting the protective way she held her son, the exhaustion carved into her features, the worn scrubs that had been washed so many times they'd faded to gray. Your son said his heart is broken. What did he mean? Ivy's jaw tightened. It's a congenital defect. He's had it since birth. Truncus arteriosus, Jamie supplied helpfully. It means the big tubes in my heart didn't grow right. I've had 2 surgeries already, but I need another one, and it costs more money than we have. Jamie, Ivy's voice cracked. We don't talk about money with strangers. He's not a stranger. He's Mrs. Elena's son. Jamie looked at Dominic with perfect trust. Mrs. Elena is nice. She gives me crackers when Mom's working and reads me stories about dragons. So her son must be nice too. Elena made a soft sound. Grief and love and something else Dominic couldn't identify. She moved to Ivy's side and placed a gentle hand on her arm. How much? Dominic asked. Ivy blinked. Excuse me? The surgery. How much does it cost? That's not... You don't have to... How much? The number, when she finally said it, was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. More than most people would see in a lifetime. More than a night shift nurse at a free clinic could ever hope to save. A pittance, to a man like Dominic Russo. I'll pay for it, he said. The words fell into silence. Ivy stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Jamie's face split into a grin. And Elena closed her eyes and pressed her hand to her heart, as if she were witnessing a miracle. No. Ivy's voice was firm despite its tremor. I don't know who you are, but I don't accept charity from strangers. Especially not strangers who have men with guns standing by the door. It's not charity, it's an investment. In what? Dominic looked at Jamie, at this brave, fragile boy who had offered a broken man the only treasure he possessed. In something I lost a long time ago, he said quietly, something I'd like to find again. Ivy's expression shifted. Suspicion warred with desperation, pride with the raw animal need to save her child. Dominic had seen that look before. He'd worn it himself, in the months before Marco's diagnosis, when he'd been too blind to see what was happening right in front of him. Let me help, he said. Please. The word felt foreign in his mouth. He couldn't remember the last time he'd said please to anyone. Jamie tugged at his mother's sleeve. Mom, he said please. I heard him, baby. You always say please is magic, that it means someone really, really means it. Ivy looked at her son, looked at Dominic, looked at Elena, who nodded almost imperceptibly. One dinner, she said finally, you can explain who you are and what you actually want. And if I don't like the answers, we walk away, and you forget you ever met us. Agreed. And you don't pay for anything until I say yes. Also agreed. Jamie pumped his fist in the air. Does this mean we're getting pancakes? Mom only lets us have pancakes on special occasions. Despite everything, despite the grief and the shock and the strange, terrifying feeling of his carefully frozen heart beginning to thaw, Dominic smiled. Pancakes, he said, as many as you can eat. Jamie cheered. Ivy shook her head, but there was something softening in her expression, a crack in the armor she wore as carefully as Dominic wore his. And Elena Russo watched her son smile for the first time in 3 years and began to believe that miracles might still be possible. The restaurant Dominic chose was not what Ivy expected. She'd braced herself for something intimidating. Crystal chandeliers, snobbish waiters, a menu without prices that would make her feel like a fraud. Instead, he brought them to a small Italian place in Carroll Gardens, with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles, and a grandmother in the kitchen who came out to pinch Jamie's cheeks and declare him too skinny. This was my father's favorite restaurant, Dominic said. watching Jamie devour a plate of pancakes that the kitchen had made special, despite it being dinner time. He used to bring me here when I was Jamie's age. Before he became... Ivy stopped, glancing at her son. Before he became what he became. Yes. Dominic's voice was matter of fact. You want to know who I am, I'll tell you. My family has controlled territory in Brooklyn for 3 generations. We do things that are illegal. We hurt people who threaten us. I have blood on my hands that will never wash off. Ivy's grip tightened on her water glass. And you're telling me this because? Because you asked for the truth. Because my mother loves your son, and I won't build anything on lies. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. And because I need you to understand why I want to help. I'm listening. 3 years ago, my son died. The words came out flat, rehearsed, like he'd said them so many times they'd lost their edges. His name was Marco. He was 5 years old. He had the same condition as Jamie, truncus arteriosus. We didn't catch it in time. The air left Ivy's lungs. She looked at this man, this dangerous, powerful man, and saw the grief she carried reflected back at her. The same terror, the same desperate, clawing love. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I was building an empire. Meetings, negotiations, wars that seemed so important I couldn't miss them for anything. His jaw tightened. I missed the signs, the fatigue, the breathlessness, the way he couldn't keep up with other children. My wife begged me to slow down, to pay attention. But I was too busy being powerful to notice my son was dying. That wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. No self-pity in his voice, just cold, absolute certainty. By the time we got the diagnosis, it was too late for surgery. He died in my arms 3 weeks later, asking me why it hurt so much. He looked at Jamie, still happily eating pancakes, oblivious to the weight of the conversation happening above him. I would give everything I have, every dollar, every alliance, every breath in my body, to go back and pay attention. I can't do that. But I can pay attention now. I can make sure another child doesn't die because his mother couldn't afford to save him. Ivy felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. I've done the research, she said. I know Jamie's condition inside and out. I've read every study, every case report, every surgical outcome analysis. I know which hospitals have the best survival rates, which surgeons have the steadiest hands, which post-operative protocols produce the fewest complications. Her voice cracked. I know exactly how to save my son. I just can't afford to do it. Now you can. It's not that simple. If I take your money, I owe you. And I've seen what happens to people who owe men like you. You won't owe me anything. Everyone owes men like you something. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table. What's this? A contract. It says I'm funding Jamie's surgery as a charitable donation, with no expectation of repayment or reciprocation. It's been reviewed by 3 independent lawyers. You can have your own lawyer look at it too. He met her eyes. I'm not trying to own you, Ivy. I'm trying to do one good thing in a life that hasn't had many. Ivy stared at the envelope. Her hands were shaking. Why? She asked. Why us? There are thousands of sick children in this city. What makes Jamie special? He offered me his toy car. Dominic's voice roughened. A stranger. A man who frightens grown men into silence. And your son walked up to me and offered me the only thing he had because he thought it might make me less sad. He paused. Marco would have done the same thing. He had the same heart. And I don't mean the broken one. Jamie looked up from his pancakes, syrup smeared across his cheek. Mom, are you crying? Happy tears, baby. She wiped her face with trembling fingers. Just happy tears. Oh, good. Jamie returned to his food, then paused, looking at Dominic. Does this mean you're going to help fix my heart? Dominic glanced at Ivy. She held his gaze for a long moment. This man who had killed, who had ordered deaths, who ruled an empire built on violence and fear. And beneath all of that, a father who had lost his son and was desperately trying to find redemption. She thought about pride, about independence, about all the reasons she should refuse. Then she thought about Jamie's next birthday, about watching him grow up, about all the years they could have together if she was brave enough to accept help from a monster who was trying to become a man. Yes, she said, he's going to help fix your heart. Jamie's face split into a grin. He scrambled out of his chair, ran around the table and threw his arms around Dominic's neck. Dominic froze. His hands hovered in the air, uncertain, like he'd forgotten what to do with them. Then, slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around the boy and held him. When he looked at Ivy over Jamie's shoulder, his eyes were bright with tears he refused to let fall. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. And somewhere in the space between them, something fragile and terrifying began to grow. The surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks to run every test, consult every specialist, ensure that Jamie's small body was ready for the procedure that would either save him or... Ivy refused to finish that thought. Dominic moved them into the Russo estate on the second day. Ivy had resisted at first, her pride bristling at the idea of charity that extended beyond the surgery itself. But Elena had taken her hands and spoken quietly about the commute to the hospital, about the stress of working night shifts while caring for a sick child, about the peace of mind that came from having a full staff of people ready to help at any hour. "Let us take care of you," Elena had said. "Both of you. It's been so long since this house had any joy in it." So Ivy had packed their meager belongings, 2 suitcases, a box of books, Jamie's collection of battered toy cars, and moved into a guest suite larger than her entire apartment. Jamie had his own room adjoining hers, decorated in soft blues with a window seat overlooking the garden. Within a day, he'd declared it the best room in the whole world and adopted Elena as his honorary grandmother. Elena bloomed under the attention. Ivy watched the older woman transform, the sadness that had shadowed her features lifting, replaced by a warmth that seemed to light her from within. She took Jamie to the garden to look for caterpillars. She read him stories before bed, doing all the voices. She taught him to make pasta from scratch, both of them covered in flour and laughing. "She lost Marco too," Dominic said one evening, finding Ivy on the terrace watching the sunset. "He was her only grandchild. When he died, part of her died with him. And now Jamie's bringing her back. He's bringing all of us back." Dominic moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I didn't realize how dead this house had become until I heard him laughing in the halls." Ivy turned to look at him. In the fading light, the sharp angles of his face seemed softer, more human. She'd spent the past 2 weeks learning him, his rhythms, his silences, the way he watched Jamie with an expression that cracked her heart wide open. He was at the estate more than she'd expected. Business happened elsewhere now, contained in meetings and phone calls that never touched the sanctuary he'd created. He appeared at breakfast asking about Jamie's night. He came home for dinner every evening, listening intently as Jamie recounted his adventures with Elena. He sat in Jamie's room at bedtime, reading stories in a voice that had surely never been so gentle before. And he looked at Ivy. She caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice. Quick glances that lingered too long, a softening around his eyes when she laughed at something Jamie said. The careful way he made sure she had everything she needed without ever making her feel like a guest. "You don't have to keep checking on me," she said one night, finding him in the library with a glass of whiskey and a stack of papers. I know you have a business to run. The business runs itself. That's what lieutenants are for. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. You've been on your feet since 6 this morning. I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be. Ivy sat, too tired to argue. The chair was leather, worn soft with age, and it embraced her like a hug. Tell me about Jamie's father, Dominic said. The question caught her off guard. Why? Because I want to know. Because you've been raising that boy alone for 6 years and I can't understand how anyone could leave either of you. Ivy was quiet for a moment, old wounds aching beneath the surface. His name was Ryan. We met in nursing school. He was charming, ambitious, everything I thought I wanted. She paused. Then I got pregnant. And suddenly, I wasn't part of his plan anymore. He left before Jamie was born. Signed away his parental rights without a fight. He's a fool. He's a man who knew what he wanted, and it wasn't us. Ivy shrugged, but the old hurt still lingered. Jamie asks about him sometimes. I never know what to say. Tell him the truth, that some people don't have the capacity for the kind of love he deserves, and that's their loss, not his. Ivy looked at Dominic, really looked, past the reputation and the power and the carefully constructed walls. She saw a man who had loved his son with a ferocity that still burned 3 years after the loss. A man who understood, in a way few people could, what it meant to love a child so much, it felt like dying. You would have been a good father, she said softly, if you'd had more time. His jaw tightened. I wasn't, though. I had 5 years and I wasted them on things that didn't matter. You're not wasting them now. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Dominic held her gaze and something shifted in the air. A charge, a possibility, a door cracking open that had been closed for so long. Ivy dash dash. His phone shattered the moment. He glanced at the screen and she watched his expression transform, softness hardening into ice, warmth draining away until only the crime lord remained. I have to take this. He was already rising, already retreating. We'll talk later. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the library with a racing heart and 1,000 questions. Later never came, because the next morning, everything changed. Ivy was in the kitchen with Jamie, helping him eat breakfast around the excitement of his upcoming hospital visit, when Dominic burst through the door. His face was pale, his eyes wild, his composure shattered in a way she'd never seen. Get away from the windows, he said. Both of you, now. What's happening? Ivy was already moving, scooping Jamie into her arms, her heart pounding. The Genovese family. They've been looking for leverage against me for years. Dominic was checking windows, issuing rapid commands into his phone, his men materializing from every corner of the house. Someone told them about Jamie, about the surgery. They know I'm vulnerable. Ice flooded Ivy's veins. What do they want? They want me to hand over territory, distribution routes, shipping lanes, things I've spent a decade building. His jaw tightened. And if I don't, they're threatening to make sure Jamie never makes it to that operating table. Jamie's arms tightened around Ivy's neck. Mom, why is everyone scared? It's okay, baby. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Everything's going to be okay. She looked at Dominic over her son's head, and she saw the truth in his eyes. The Genovese family wasn't bluffing. They would kill a sick child to gain an advantage. And Dominic Russo, the man who had offered them salvation, was the reason her son was now in danger. This is my fault, he said, as if reading her thoughts. I brought you into this. I made you a target. You tried to save his life. And now I might be the reason he loses it. Ivy crossed to him, still holding Jamie, and did something that surprised them both. She took his hand. Then save it again, she said, whatever it takes. Whatever you have to do. I'm not losing my son. Not to his heart, and not to your enemies." Dominic stared at her. She watched him cycle through shock, guilt, and something else. Something fierce and protective that made her pulse quicken. "I need you to trust me," he said. "Completely. Can you do that?" She thought about trust, about all the ways it had failed her. Her father, who'd left. Ryan, who'd abandoned her. A world that had never given her any reason to believe in anyone but herself. Then she looked at Jamie, who was watching Dominic with complete, unwavering faith. "Yes," she said, "I trust you." Dominic squeezed her hand once, hard, then let go. "Then stay close to me," he said, "and don't let Jamie out of your sight." The war had come to their doorstep, and Ivy was about to learn exactly what kind of man Dominic Russo became when someone threatened the people he loved. The Genovese family made their move 3 days before Jamie's surgery. Ivy had started to believe they might be safe. Dominic had tripled security, moved them to a safe house on the estate grounds, coordinated with allies across the city. Every entrance was guarded. Every exit was monitored. Jamie wasn't allowed outside without an armed escort, a precaution he treated as a grand adventure. Bodyguards became his knights. The safe house became his castle. He didn't understand the danger. Ivy was grateful for that, even as it kept her awake at night. She was reading to him when the power went out. The room plunged into darkness. Jamie's hand found hers instantly, his fingers cold and trembling. "Mom?" "It's okay, baby. Just a power outage." But her heart was racing, her nurse's training screaming that this was wrong, this was planned, this was... The window exploded inward. Glass rained across the room. Ivy threw herself over Jamie, shielding him with her body, feeling shards bite into her arms and back. Men poured through the shattered frame, black-clad, masked, moving with terrifying precision. "Take the boy," one of them ordered. "Kill the woman." Ivy's world narrowed to a single point: protect Jamie. She grabbed him and ran for the door, her bare feet slicing on broken glass, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her she heard footsteps, shouts, the sound of men giving chase. The hallway was dark. Emergency lights flickered, casting everything in bloody red. Ivy ran blindly. Jamie clutched to her chest, his face buried against her shoulder. "Mom, I'm scared." "I know, baby, I know. Just hold on." She rounded a corner and slammed into a wall of muscle. Arms grabbed her, and she screamed, lashing out with everything she had. "Ivy! Ivy, it's me!" Dominic's voice cut through her panic. She sagged against him, her legs giving out, and he caught her. Caught them both, holding them upright with desperate strength. "They're in the house," she gasped. "They came through the window." "I know. My men are engaging them now." His hand cupped her face, tilting it toward the flickering light. Blood streaked her cheek. Hers or someone else's. She couldn't tell. "Are you hurt? Is Jamie hurt?" "We're okay. We're..." Gunfire erupted somewhere behind them. Dominic's expression hardened into something terrifying. "This way. There's a panic room in the basement. You'll be safe there." He led them through the maze of hallways, his body positioned between them and every possible threat. Ivy clutched Jamie and followed, her mind racing, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. They were 10 feet from the basement door when the man stepped out of the shadows. He was older than the others, silver-haired, expensively dressed, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ivy recognized the type instantly. Not a soldier, a general. The man giving orders. "Dominic." His voice was almost pleasant. "I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk." "Genovese." Dominic shifted, placing himself squarely between the man and Ivy. "You're in my home. A necessary intrusion. You've been ignoring my calls. The man's gaze slid past Dominic to where Ivy stood frozen, Jamie's face pressed against her neck. This must be the famous child. The one who's turned the great Dominic Russo into a sentimental fool. Leave them out of this. I would have, if you'd been reasonable, but you forced my hand. Genovese pulled a gun from his jacket, casual as drawing a cigarette. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to sign over the shipping routes. You're going to withdraw from the docks. And in exchange, I won't put a bullet in that boy's broken heart. Ivy felt Jamie whimper against her shoulder. She held him tighter, her mind racing through options. None of them good, all of them ending in blood. Let them go first, Dominic said. His voice was calm, controlled, giving nothing away. The woman and the boy walk out of here unharmed. Then we talk. You're not in a position to negotiate. I'm always in a position to negotiate. Dominic took a step forward, slow and deliberate. You came into my house. You threatened my family. Do you really think you're leaving here alive? Something flickered in Genovese's expression. Doubt. The first crack in his composure. Your men are pinned down. Your security is compromised. I have 20 soldiers in this building. You had 20 soldiers? Dominic's smile was cold. Now you have 6. And in about 30 seconds, you'll have none. As if on cue, the sound of gunfire intensified, then stopped abruptly. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant sound of footsteps approaching. Dominic's men emerged from the shadows. A dozen of them, maybe more, materializing like ghosts, their weapons trained on Genovese with lethal precision. You were saying? Dominic asked softly. Genovese's face contorted with rage, his gun swung toward Jamie. Ivy moved without thinking. She shoved Jamie behind her and lunged forward, putting herself directly in the line of fire. The gun discharged. Pain exploded through her side, white-hot, blinding, and she crumpled, her vision swimming. Someone was screaming. Jamie. Jamie was screaming her name. And then Dominic was there, his face hovering above hers, his hands pressing against her wound with desperate pressure. Ivy, Ivy, stay with me. Look at me. Jamie dash. He's safe. Elena has him. He's safe. His voice cracked. Why did you do that? Why would you? He was going to shoot my son. The words came out slurred, distant. Couldn't let him. Had to protect. You're not dying for this. Dominic's face was wet. Tears, she realized distantly. He was crying. You're not dying for me. Do you understand? I forbid it. A laugh bubbled up through the pain. You can't forbid death. Watch me. He barked orders. Medical team, helicopter, the best trauma surgeon in the city. Ivy heard it all through a haze, the world fading in and out like a badly tuned radio. But she felt his hand gripping hers. She felt his lips against her forehead, murmuring words she couldn't quite catch. She felt, in the midst of all that pain, something that felt absurdly like hope. Dominic. Her voice was barely a whisper. Don't talk. Save your strength. Genovese. Dead. My men handled it. His grip tightened on her hand. It's over, Ivy. It's all over. You just have to hold on. Jamie's surgery will happen, on schedule, with you sitting in the waiting room, healthy and whole. He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. I can't lose you. Do you understand? I've lost too much already. I can't lose you too. Then don't. She reached up with her free hand, her bloodied fingers finding his cheek. Keep me, the way you kept your promise, the way you saved my son. I love you. The words tore out of him like they'd been trapped for years. I love you, Ivy. I've loved you since you stood in that clinic and refused to take my money. I've loved you every moment since, and I will love you until I take my last breath. She smiled through the pain. That's good, because I love you too. His kiss was gentle, featherlight against her lips, tasting of tears and blood, and something that felt like forever. Then the medical team arrived, and Ivy let herself slip into darkness, trusting that Dominic would be there when she woke up. He'd promised, after all. And Dominic Russo always kept his promises. Ivy woke to the sound of a toy car rolling across a hospital tray. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, her body heavy and distant, her mind swimming through layers of medication. The room came into focus slowly. White walls, beeping monitors, a window showing gray morning sky. And Jamie, sitting cross-legged at the foot of her bed, pushing his battered red car in careful circles. "Mom!" He scrambled toward her, stopping just short of throwing himself against her. His eyes were huge, red-rimmed, shadowed with exhaustion. "You woke up. The doctor said you would, but it was taking so long and I was scared." "Hey, baby." Her voice came out cracked, barely a whisper. "I'm okay. I'm right here. You got hurt because of me." His lower lip trembled. "Mr. Dominic said the bad men wanted to hurt me and you got in the way, and it's my fault." "No." She reached for him, ignoring the pull of stitches and the fire in her side. "None of this is your fault, Jamie. None of it. I would do it again 1,000 times to keep you safe. That's what moms do." Jamie climbed carefully onto the bed beside her, tucking himself against her uninjured side with the practiced caution of a child who had spent too much time in hospitals. Ivy wrapped her arm around him and held on, breathing in the smell of his hair, feeling his heart beat against her ribs. Alive. They were both alive. "Mr. Dominic stayed all night," Jamie said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "He held your hand and talked to you even though you couldn't hear. He said he was telling you all the reasons you had to wake up." Ivy looked toward the corner of the room where a chair had been pulled close to the bed. Empty now, but she could see the imprint of someone who had sat there for hours. Days, maybe. "Where is he?" "Getting coffee. He said hospital coffee is terrible, but it's better than leaving you." Jamie lifted his head, his expression serious. "Mom, I think Mr. Dominic loves you." "What makes you say that?" "Because he looks at you the way I look at my toy car." Jamie held up the battered red vehicle, its missing wheel and scratched paint somehow precious. "Like you're the best thing he has." The door opened before Ivy could respond. Dominic stepped through, a paper cup in each hand, and stopped dead when he saw her eyes open. The cups hit the floor. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside the bed, his hands finding her face, her hair, her shoulders, touching her like he needed to confirm she was real. "You're awake." His voice was ragged, wrecked. "God, Ivy. 2 days. 2 days of not knowing if you'd ever—" "I'm here." She covered his hands with her own. "I'm here." He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing hard, his whole body shaking. Ivy held him as best she could with one arm and a body full of stitches, letting him fall apart the way she suspected he'd been holding himself together by sheer will since the moment she'd been shot. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. "I thought I'd finally found something good, something real, and I'd destroyed it. The way I destroy everything. You didn't destroy me. You saved me." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "You saved both of us." "You saved yourselves. I just gave us a home, a family, a reason to believe that good things could happen to people like us." She smiled, her heart full to bursting. "That's not destruction, Dominic. That's redemption." He kissed her then, gentle, reverent, mindful of Jamie watching with undisguised delight. It tasted like coffee and tears and the kind of hope that bloomed in the darkest places. 2 weeks later, Jamie had his surgery. Ivy sat in the waiting room with Dominic on one side and Elena on the other, her stitches healing, her body still sore but present, whole. Alive to witness this moment that had seemed impossible just months ago. The surgery took 7 hours. 7 hours of pacing and praying and gripping hands so tightly they went numb. 7 hours of Elena murmuring rosaries under her breath and Dominic staring at the operating room doors like he could will them to open with good news. When the surgeon finally emerged, his face was tired but smiling. The repair was successful. His heart is whole. Ivy collapsed against Dominic, sobbing with relief, feeling his arms wrap around her and hold her upright. Elena wept beside them, her hands clasped together, her eyes lifted toward heaven. "He's going to be okay," Ivy managed through her tears. "He's really going to be okay." "He's going to be perfect," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's going to grow up and cause trouble and break hearts and live, Ivy. He's going to live." Jamie came home 2 weeks after that. Home, not to Ivy's cramped apartment in Brooklyn, but to the Russo estate, to the room with the window seat and the garden view, to the grandmother who had claimed him and the man who had saved him, and the life none of them had expected to find. The toy car sat on Jamie's nightstand now, repaired and repainted, its missing wheel replaced with one Dominic had custom-made to match. Jamie had insisted on keeping the scratches. Battle scars, he called them, like Mom's. Spring arrived with a warmth that felt like forgiveness. The garden bloomed. Jamie grew stronger every day, his cheeks filling out, his energy returning, his laugh ringing through halls that had been silent for far too long. And on a morning bright with sunshine, Dominic asked Ivy to walk with him through the rose garden. She knew something was different. He was nervous. Dominic Russo, who stared down crime lords without flinching, nervous as a schoolboy. His hands kept moving to his pocket, then away, then back again. "Dominic." She stopped beneath an arbor heavy with white roses. "Whatever it is, just say it." He turned to face her, took her hands in his, and sank to one knee. "I had a speech planned," he said, his voice unsteady. "I've been working on it for weeks. All the things I wanted to tell you. How you saved me, how you brought light into a house that had known only darkness, how your son taught me that my heart wasn't as broken as I thought it was." "Dominic." But I keep forgetting the words, because when I look at you, I can't think of anything except how much I want to spend the rest of my life looking at you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's ring. She gave it to my father when she was 18 years old, and he was a boy from the neighborhood with nothing to offer except his heart. She said that was enough. That love was enough." He opened the box. Inside, nestled against black velvet, was a ring, a simple diamond in an antique gold setting, elegant and timeless and glowing in the morning light. "I'm not a boy with nothing anymore. I have money and power and influence, but none of that matters without you. None of it means anything if I can't share it with you and Jamie." His eyes held hers, bright with unshed tears. "Marry me, Ivy. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life being the man you made me want to become." Ivy looked at him. This man who had terrified her, challenged her, saved her, loved her. This man who had offered her son a chance at life and asked for nothing in return. This man who had learned to feel again because a little boy with a broken heart had seen his pain and offered him a toy car. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying all at once. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting for her across generations and tragedies. Then he rose and pulled her into his arms and kissed her beneath the white roses, sealing a promise that had started with a single act of kindness. When they returned to the house, Jamie was waiting on the terrace with Elena, bouncing with barely contained excitement. Did you say yes? He demanded. Mr. Dominic practiced his speech like 100 times, but he kept messing it up. I said yes, baby. Jamie whooped and launched himself at them, wrapping his arms around both of their legs, his grin splitting his face. Elena joined them, tears streaming down her cheeks, and they stood together in a tangle of arms and joy, a family built from grief and hope, and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. Later that night, after Jamie had fallen asleep clutching his toy car and Elena had retired to her room and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Ivy found Dominic standing at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the moonlit garden. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her arms around him from behind. "Marco." His voice was soft, but not broken. Not anymore. "I think he'd be happy. I think he'd look at Jamie and see a brother. I think he'd look at you and understand why his father finally learned to smile again. He'd be proud of you." "I hope so." Dominic turned in her arms, cupping her face in his hands. "I spent 3 years trying to die without actually dying. You made me want to live again, Ivy. You and Jamie. You gave me a reason to believe that the world could still hold something good. It can." She rose on her toes and kissed him softly. "It does. Right here, in this house, with this family. The world is full of good things, Dominic. We just have to be brave enough to reach for them." He smiled, a real smile, full and warm, lighting up his face in a way that still caught her off guard. "Then I'll keep reaching," he said, "as long as I have you to reach with." Outside, the garden bloomed beneath the stars. Inside, a little boy slept with a whole heart and a toy car, and dreams of the father he'd found by accident and claimed on purpose. And in each other's arms, two people who had been broken found their way to whole. Some gifts, it turned out, couldn't be wrapped or bought or planned. Some gifts came in the form of a battered toy car, offered by a child who saw sadness in a stranger and decided to help. And sometimes, those were the gifts that saved everything. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.